Uh, Good afternoon, and welcome to this final broadcast of the Political Science 216 2020 presidential election Zoom webinar. For those of you who are new, and we have new people logging on each week, my name is Joel Cassiola, and I am a member of the Political Science Department. And it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this afternoon's panel discussion, which will be different than all of the previous panel discussions. And I hope it will be not only unique, but extremely useful for everyone in the viewing audience on what you can do besides voting to make your community better. And I will get to our panel and their respective responsibilities in a moment. But I have a couple of obligations to meet since this is the last meeting of this course. First, I have a couple of thank yous that I need to mention publicly. I've thanked them privately, but I want everyone to know, especially the audience in the general public group, that you probably would not have been able to join this webinar if it weren't for one person in the Alumni Association, Senem Ozer. She, from week one, joined with me in having a vision of expanding the public audience for these broadcasts. And she used the capabilities of the Alumni Association to sign up people and publicize the existence of the webinar. So I want to give Senem a shout out for all of her work. I believe the association sent out 3 emails to their membership about the webinar. And I want to say to everyone in the audience, Senem's work really made a difference in that we have had the largest public audience for any of the previous 4 presidential courses. Approximately 200 people in the public have joined at least one of the sessions. So I really want to express my gratitude to Senem. Another person who has been critically important is the College of Liberal and Creative Arts communication staff member, Chris Carpenter. And he is the one that uploaded the recordings to the college website. And importantly, the recordings will stay up on the college archive website for however long they have space. And that means if you want to go to watch a weekly discussion, whether it's on the pandemic or the Electoral College or foreign affairs on the latest on Iran, you can go to that week's broadcast. So it will be an educational resource for teachers and students and members of the public as well. So I want to thank Chris for all of his technical work behind the scenes to make the recordings available on our shared website with the College of Liberal and Creative Arts. So those are 2 thank yous. I want to issue a 3rd thank you to all of the enrolled students, and we have had a good number of enrolled students, about 170 enrolled students. And I want to thank the members of the public for logging on, and something that I'm not used to doing, but I am delighted to say that a good number of the public audience felt moved to make financial contributions to the Department of Political Science. And I can assure you of two things about that. The need is great, especially with budgets being cut in the university and in the department, and that we will use it wisely in expanding political education for undergraduate and graduate students at San Francisco State, but also the public. I am hopeful, and I will do what I can to expand this medium before the next presidential election. And we do a lot of courses in the political science department that I know will be of great public interest. And if I can use our experience with the webinar to convince other colleagues to do the same, the department can make its offerings both available to undergraduate and graduate enrolled students, but also to the public. And I commit and pledge that I will argue for doing that between now and 2024. So with those thank yous, let me just shift to one more housekeeping bit of business, and that is ending the semester for the enrolled students. Last night at 11:59 was the deadline for taking the third quiz. If you are an enrolled student and for one reason or another could not take the quiz before last night at midnight, please write to me and I will open up the quiz so that you can take it at a convenient time. Also, for the enrolled students whose average is above 70 on the three quizzes, your obligations, you will be happy to know, are ended, and there will be no more work or assignments for this course, and you will earn the credit grade. For those students who have a below 70 average on the three quizzes, I will ask you to do the extra credit assignment, which I have described on the iLearn page. It is choosing 1 week's panel discussions, any week you want, from 1 through 10, and providing a detailed summary of the faculty members' main points. And if you do that well, you will probably earn enough extra credit points to make up for any discrepancies beneath the threshold for the credit grade. If you have any questions about doing the extra credit assignment, please don't hesitate to write to me on email, and I will be glad to clarify or answer any questions. The deadline for the extra credit assignment is December 21st. So that gives you a few days to do it after final exams are over. I wanted to make it later than most final exams so that you can have the time to do the extra credit assignment. I think with that, we've handled all of the preliminary business, and I want to thank this afternoon's panel for their patience. And let's go to our first speaker, who has appeared on this webinar, I think 3 times, and therefore he does not need a formal introduction. However, I do want to express my thanks to Professor Ron Hayduk for not only appearing on our Inequality Week, but also election night and the analysis. So this may be your fourth time, Ron. So he is very active in helping students work outside of the classroom and applying their knowledge in the classroom to the field or the community. And let me just give you the title of today's talk, today's topic. Now that the election is over, what can you do before the next election to improve our society? So, Professor Hayduk, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Joel. I want to take this opportunity to thank Joel Cassiola, and I hope that you can all join me on behalf of everyone. I want to thank you, Joel, because you've done a tremendous amount of work to make this a very great and successful class. And you've done, along with the extensive roster of speakers, maybe I've been here too long, too many times, but you've done a really important service for students and the public at large. It can't be underscored enough how important it is to have, vital information to participate effectively in our democracy. And so can everyone, do a joint, can we do the Zoom clap? Can we do the big Zoom clap for Professor Cassiola?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, and also congratulations to you all on, finishing the semester in a kind of a wild, crazy, historic year. So congratulations to you all for making it through. So my question is, why stop at voting when there are many, many other meaningful, effective, and enjoyable forms of political engagement, civic engagement that we can undertake to advance or defend your interests, improve governing, and deepen our democracy? After all, think about it. The business of policymaking is ongoing. It's like a year-round activity. Elected officials make important decisions that affect you, whether you know it or not, or like it or not, on a regular and year-round basis, and not just at the national level, right? I mean, don't forget, we have more than 90,000 governments in the United States, and you have around a dozen elected officials who are making law and policy as we speak on a broad range of issues, weekly, monthly, whether it's from fixing the potholes, whose potholes get filled and what schools get computers, to how will we address the pandemic and climate change. As the title of Harold Lasswell's classic book put it, politics is about who gets what, when, how. Politics is about the process of deciding who gets what, when, how, the conflicts involved in that. In other words, politics is about what issues are prioritized, when and how will government or the people address such problems, and how the costs and benefits are distributed in our society, the rewards and punishments, if you will. So, you might want to continue to pay attention to and monitor your representatives, and perhaps also consider taking some additional action beyond voting to make sure that your interests are addressed in ways that meet your needs and our collective well-being. That's really what democracy is about. And I should say that civic engagement is not always aimed at government. It can also target social and economic institutions and actors, which also, of course, profoundly affect our lives. So there's lots of reasons to think about this business. Nor should you think about civic engagement as primarily a liberal or left-wing enterprise. There are many examples of conservative and right-wing civic engagement. forms of civic engagement. Think for a moment about America's extensive history of social movements from the American Revolution onward, including the 19th century abolitionist, suffragette, populist, labor movements on the left, to right-wing nativist, anti-immigrant, and religious movements in the 19th century, to the 20th century movements of civil rights, feminist, gay, liberation, peace, and environmental movements on the left, to anti-abortion, anti-busing, segregationists, states' rights, white supremacists, militia movements on the right. And today, there's many movements on the left and the right. Something like 30 million people have participated in rallies and marches in the United States since 2016. That's more than 1 in 10 Americans, prompting some scholars to dub our era as the golden age of protests, where even politicians sometimes participate in a rally or even civil disobedience. So my main point, I guess I'm trying to make, is that these movements have injected vital issues into American politics, and they have profoundly affected our laws and policies. And I guess I also want to say that, you know, civic and political engagement in these various forms is kind of a very American thing to do. Think for a moment about what matters to you. What issues do you care about? That's the stuff that motivates civic and political engagement. Here's a list of the top issues in this election. How does your list compare with other Americans? Polls show many Americans want good paying and meaningful employment. They want access to good healthcare, quality education, clean air and water, affordable housing, civil liberties, safety, and many other issues. They might differ on how to achieve these outcomes, aside from other issues. But think about what you need and want. What problems do you see? What solutions make sense to you? These are the ingredients of civic engagement, which can make for better government and deeper democracy. Here's the good news. Whatever the issues you care about, there's a group currently working to advance or defend those issues and those interests. People just like you who take simple, easy, and enjoyable actions you can take alone or with other individuals, activities that can be meaningful and impactful. There are thousands of interest groups, tens of thousands, that regularly lobby elected officials at every level of government or in the economic or social realm. And in doing so, can affect public policy and private practices. You can join such activity with other like-minded individuals, or you can do it by yourself, whether via inside lobbying or outside activities. There's plenty of accessible on-ramps you can take, plenty of pathways into the wonderful world of civic engagement. And there's service learning opportunities and internships here at San Francisco State, which I know our next speakers will discuss in greater detail shortly. So what are we talking about? What's civic engagement? What am I really meaning here? Civic engagement refers to the various ways people seek to make change, to improve their community. And here, community can mean your sort of geographic neighborhood or an identity or issue or ideological group. Civic engagement can be participating in public dialogue via social media or volunteering at a local food bank. It can be signing an online petition, or it can take the form of working with others to solve a local problem or to mitigate global climate change. It can be participating in socially distanced rally or protest or running for office. All these acts seek to improve one's community and the broader society. That's the essence of civic engagement, working together to make change. Now, it must be said that there are some forms of civic engagement which should not be encouraged because these other forms that I'm referring to aim to undermine the very principles of democracy, basic human rights and the rule of law, activity that seeks to promote hatred and intolerance towards others. These forms that have form the bedrock of authoritarianism and fascism. Well, okay, so how extensive is civic engagement in America today? This chart shows many Americans do, in fact, take civic action. With social media activity and contacting elected officials at the top of the chart here, the most frequent kinds of political participation besides voting, with fewer people attending events down towards the bottom. I should say that this data is from 2019, so it doesn't include this summer's massive protests and other activities. Importantly, studies show that there are many, many benefits to taking civic engagement. Benefits that range from improving governing to improving academic achievement, from increasing individual well-being to improving social well-being. Civic engagement helps governments stay accountable, stay responsive to its citizens. When people are paying attention to government and actively engaging with elected officials, community members help protect themselves from arbitrary exercise of power or government corruption. And when people provide input about their needs and wants, and when citizens demand elected officials to do something helpful or stop something harmful, they make government more responsive to them. And citizens are not, and when citizens are not communicating their views to decision makers, elected officials may be deprived of vital information needed to reach informed choices, which could have negative consequences. This point is especially important regarding disadvantaged and marginalized groups, whose views especially need to be taken into account to formulate inclusive and equitable and just public policy. In short, without the input of constituents, public policy could be less effective, less democratic, and maybe even, well, I'll leave it at that. There could be some problems. Anyway, so what are the personal benefits? Aside from benefits to government and community life, research shows civic participation yields plenty of personal and societal benefits. It enhances personal development, including an individual's sense of efficacy, their sense of responsibility towards others. They gain skills, social capital, a whole host of things. Research shows that civic engagement and academic achievement are linked. Students who engage in civic activities have higher grades and have higher graduation rates. Civically engaged adults have higher self-esteem and a greater sense that they can overcome difficulties in life. It's called efficacy. Civically engaged adults have larger social networks and greater social support, greater appreciation for their community, and a greater sense of belonging. Studies show civic participation yields health benefits for young and older folks alike. Volunteers enjoy better psychological well-being and positive emotional and physical health. Participants gain in communication, gain skills in communication, planning, decision-making, leadership, critical thinking, research, and writing. And civically engaged individuals have a greater sense of meaning, direction, and purpose. In other words, participation can help enrich the lives of individuals. It leads to personal empowerment. Besides, civic engagement can be very fun and very rewarding. Some of my best friends in life are folks that I've met, my partner, folks that I met in the course of my own activism. Those deep friendships and connections can really redound for your life. It's a lifelong learning skill. So perhaps most important, civic engagement can help rebuild trust in government and amongst us, which I argue in my research on various forms of civic engagement that might really require rebuilding government itself in some ways. We need to develop deeper and more democratic institutions, I would argue. my research argues, as many others do, that rely on more direct participation of community members rather than just via representatives, and not just via ballot initiatives either. One exciting innovation that answers some of the limitations of representative politics is a form of direct democracy called participatory budgeting, which I think is awesome, very exciting. Typically, budget allocations such as grants for computers and libraries or meals for homebound seniors are made by elected officials at varying degrees of removal from those who use the libraries or need those services in their homes. Participatory budgeting brings those constituents into the process in deciding who gets what, when, and how, to quote Harold Lasswell again. It allows community residents to articulate problems they see, and with other community members who come from different walks of life, very important, can deliberate with each other about possible solutions and craft policies together. So PB sort of allows people greater self-rule, which is, I would argue, the essence of democracy. So there's plenty of other ways to deepen our democracy and invigorate our democracy. But let me turn the mic over to our next speakers, who are the real experts in all of this, and who can shed light on how civic engagement can also lead to gainful employment and rewarding careers. So don't forget to ask them about those things. And thanks very much, and thanks for your attention. Hope this was helpful.
Well, thank you very much, Ron. It certainly was helpful. I learned a lot about the nature of civic engagement and its consequences. And the consequences seemed really diverse. I just can't help but interject when you showed the Harold Lasswell cover. The bottom of the slide said $1.35, and that tells you how old that book must have been, because it's really hard to get a book for $1.35.
You know, I purposefully made that visible. I knew that you would appreciate it. I was hoping others picked up on that because it's a classic, but I think it's, you know, it holds up well. It's certainly the saying, the title of the book is often used as a shorthand in political science for defining what politics is about.
Absolutely. So that was startling to see, to deal with the problem of inflation, which is a really serious problem for people on fixed incomes. And I didn't even know about participatory budgeting. I think that's a great idea. And getting the recipients of funds to participate in the allocation process is a great example of participatory democracy. And I think it will bring more trust and value to people's appreciation of government. Well, moving from that terrific overview by Professor Hayduk, I want to shift to a staff member of a fixture on campus, the Office of the Institute of Civic and Community Engagement. And we are very fortunate this afternoon to have Glendy Domingo here. And Glendy is the Community and Outreach Program Coordinator for ICCE, as it is abbreviated. And Glendy, I want to welcome you to the Zoom webinar. And if you can explain to the viewers what your institute does and bring it down to the concrete level of how a student can sign up for an activity and what are the opportunities that exist. So thank you very much for coming and informing us about ICCE.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you for having us. Thank you for having me, Professor Hayduk. It's great to be in all of your presence tonight or this afternoon. Thank you for having me. Everybody, my name is Glendy Domingo. Just like Joel said, I'm the program coordinator at the Institute. I have been in my position for almost 5 years. My goodness. But just a little bit of a background about myself. Before I went to get my advanced degree, I am a first generation college student. I got my master's, and before that, I was doing community work. I worked for a nonprofit, and I worked in the Bay Area helping first generation students like me get access or understand the educational process of going to college. I was lucky enough to have mentors who assisted me in that process, and so I wanted to be that figure to work with other individuals to make that possible for them. So before my position, I was in the community doing similar work, and I will guide you through kind of some of the information about the Institute and how to use this as a resource on campus. Although we are virtually and remote, please know that we are still alive and doing our work here, and you can still contact us for any information that you'll want or any clarification even after this presentation. So again, very happy to be here. Let me just go ahead and get started here. Okay, so action after the election. As I listen to Professor Hayduk, I do agree, and I just kind of just shake my head because I will just kind of continue on some of the points that he brought up. And it brings me a smile on my face because I know that's I'm very happy that I am on the same page in terms of like passion and interest with our faculty when it comes to civic engagement. So I know there's like parallel kind of perspectives here in our institution with the staff and also with the faculty. Anyway, so moving forward, again, just bringing some light into some of the things that we can consider moving forward after the election, because kind of going back to that title, and even Professor Hayduk's title, go beyond the election, right? So whether this election resulted in your favor in how you voted, or whether it didn't, right? There's still, at the end of the day, beyond an election, there's still a lot of things to do within our community. A lot. It doesn't end. um, our some of our community organizers were working the day of the election, and they went right back to work after the election. So it's moving in that way. But we do encourage you, and one of our institute's mission is to encourage you to join that ride, to join that journey with our community partners, to move the meter in some of these challenges and issues that we face regarding regardless of a major election, which in itself is obviously very important. But again, looking at it from the local level, going to my first point, you may have heard of this: doing locally or looking locally, but thinking globally. What does that mean? So I'll kind of go more into that. What does that mean for us in the Bay Area? If you live outside of Bay Area, what does it mean for you? Moving towards the myths, right? So, as a student or, someone who may be watching us from the community, you may have a full-time job, but you still want to make a difference. Initially, this said moving like against the myths for me, but then I changed it because I said, why don't we move towards it so that we make those myths opportunities and not challenges that hinder us, or barriers that stop us from doing for participating in the work that we do. So let's move towards it and let's see what we can do. some examples and strategies that we can adapt moving forward. I do have a couple of examples of the students and some of the projects that they have done within their community. I know we have a great student coming up. However, I do have some student examples and what they've done and how they moved towards those myths and how they challenged some of those barriers, and I suppose what resulted in the movement and the path that they took. And then I'm actually going to end with ICCE, our department, and introducing you briefly about us and our resources and how you can utilize our office moving forward to continue this conversation. It really doesn't end here. So doing locally and thinking globally is addressing backyard issues for me, right? So it's really looking at our house, making sure that it's okay, it's doing its thing, despite of the ongoing challenges that they have. But it's also thinking that it's more than my backyard. Like what's going on in my backyard is really a reflection of what could be going on beyond it, and it's also my responsibility to look at how it is playing out nationally and globally. So that's the kind of perspective at least I have in thinking about civic participation and moving beyond me and towards a community that is, the city, the county, the state, the nation, and then the entire world. And with that, I do have a quote here, which is unfortunately very sad, but I do have a point that, as you can see here, nationwide, only 21% of the students experiencing poverty, 21% of them, and 35% of students overall in our nation are reading proficiently by the fourth grade. Very staggering, as reported by the National Assessment of Educational Progress. And this is only in 2019. This is very recent. And this number has not changed significantly in the past 15 years. So, also imagine if you're a reader of color, right? If you're a student of color, where do you fall in this statistic? And this is the kind of work that one of our community partners, which is called Reading Partners, addresses locally in the Bay Area, and recruits our SF State students to tackle this kind of issues that are reflecting nationwide. But they're doing a lot of this mobilization and recruiting our students as volunteers to again move the meter in some of these issues. So again, very interesting kind of numbers here, but it's really just an example, right? And I took the education route, and there are many other challenges and issues that beyond an election, right? It's kind of framing our mind and what else is going on in our backyard and what else is going on in other people's backyards. So again, actually I didn't change this, but anyway, moving towards the myths. So look, we hear this all the time in our office, maybe even with some of our professors, talking about some of the barriers of some of our students, or anybody who'd like to get involved. I don't have any past work experiences or experiences working with the community. I haven't done that before. Prior to me coming to SF State, I was working at a retail store, or whatnot, right? So how do I then plug into this community work, right? Which seems so specialized or whatnot. And then the other point is, or the other, what we hear most often recently, as everybody could probably, attest to, now that we've moved on to virtual and remote learning, and unfortunately we'll probably, be on this life for a little bit more. However, it's also the thought of we are all remote or virtual right now. There's nothing going on in my community, or I'm scared to actually go in my community, right? Because of the virus. There's I don't have PPE, or what are the implications, right, of me going into my community and making an impact when we're all kind of sheltered in place, quote unquote. You know, unfortunately, a lot of our folks aren't even sheltering in place, so there's really no, reason to not get involved. But I digress. This is one thought, and then the other thought too is, I only have 1 or 2 hours per week that I can give. Because again, I'm part of the community, I'm, working, have a part-time job, or you are a student, right? And you're also working a full-time job, and you are taking care of a family member. You don't drive, you don't have a car, right? So there may be challenges and barriers that we hear of, that goes into this, the myths, right, demystifying some of this, the challenges that may be upon us in trying to do community work. But I do acknowledge the word myth, right, because I do want to say that for a lot of our students and a lot of different individuals in our community, these are not myths. They are real, right? They are real challenges. They're gonna tell me, hey, Glendy, what do you mean myth? Like it's real for me that I don't have a car, or it's real for me that I can't go physically in the community right now. Don't call it a myth. It's real for me. So absolutely. So then what do we do to move towards that? And again, not just moving past it, but also just moving towards it, just so that we can see what we can do with what we are given at the moment, so that we can address the certain aspects of our lives, but also participate in this great, just like Professor Hayek said, this democracy that we have, right, after the election. So a couple of strategies. I do want to say this importance of knowing self, right? So you may have already known this, but it's really asking yourself the questions and doing some self-reflections, hopefully doing it consistently, but with regards to your time and your priorities, and how you can have the maximum impact, and what skills you can give, and what you have right now and are open to learning, right? Because the great thing about civic and community participation and engagement is the fact that it's mutually beneficial. So don't think that going into the community is just about all that you can give, right? It's also about what the community can give you. And most of the time, the community will give you more than when you can give it. And that is the beauty of going out there, and really speaking to people, whether it be on Zoom, doing something virtual. And I'll talk about that in terms of virtual work and kind of dealing with that barrier of doing virtual work. But it's really knowing that it's really more than what you can give. It's also what you can learn and what you're open to learning. And that goes beyond community work. That's also the kind of perspective that we should have when we're going to a new job, right? What can you give me, right? What are the skills that you can also, that I can learn for being in this position, right? Being, as able and capable individuals, what else you can give me beyond what I can give you. So really thinking about that. And then also reflecting on what community issues are important to you. Again, the whole backyard conversation. What are the issues that are important to you, whether it be aligned to your major. So let's say you're a political science major, but you're really interested in the specific aspect of immigration or climate change, or, going back to the Reading Partners statistic earlier, helping youth with their education, or helping someone read because, someone who helped you along the way, kind of like I did. That's why I talked about my work in the nonprofit. Maybe something like that, right? What are the community issues that are important to you? And then I'm also going to talk about service learning courses. This was mentioned earlier. It's really having the strategy of, okay, well, I'm already at SF State. there are service learning courses that I can take that does combine taking courses, but also doing service. So I know there are barriers that I have, but what can I do in terms of, the spring semester while taking a service learning course, applying those knowledge, but also doing some sort of service along the way? Um, and there are a couple of them in the political science department. They're actually all across the university. And I'll talk more specifically about that before I end the presentation. And then also community local engagement is also thinking about the district that you're at. Local participation is very critical. I sometimes I find joy in asking students, do you know which district you live at in San Francisco? What, like, there's a number next to it, or who is your board of who is your district supervisor, right? Because those local officials have a lot of influence, whether it be, trash collection or property taxes, right? There's a lot of influence there. So again, looking locally, looking at what is there next to you, right? And that is not just in San Francisco. Supervisors are all across the nation, all across, depending on what city you're at, whether you're watching us virtually from Los Angeles or wherever you may be. It's just also, like, for example, I'm signed up with all of the district's newsletters, because that's a way for me to keep in touch in what's going on and what they're talking about. And those meetings are usually every week, and they are in Zoom. So, and you can ask questions. They have open platforms for community partners to hold these office holders accountable of what's going on in their backyard. And it's really just putting yourself out there, taking the first step. And in this area, I do want to have you meet some of our students. So George is actually a graduate now, but he took one of our environmental studies service learning courses, and he worked at a farm because he's really, really interested in sustainable farming. However, he found a place that is in the community that he's at, which is Bayview in San Francisco. So that worked out for him in terms of transportation. He liked to tell us. So he's right there, being very close to the bees with his fingers there. So hopefully he's fine. But again, the whole issue of transportation, right? Like, what are the things that are available in your community that can help you bridge that if you can't drive, or you can't necessarily get there. It's so interesting. I bring up Alamany Farms because they are still working with students in person. They never stopped since the pandemic happened, because they are actually farming for the community, and they're giving food to those who need it during the pandemic. So again, there is a pandemic, there is an issue, there are challenges going on, but how can we plug in to help some of that? And then Maria, I want to share briefly her story, because she was involved not in one, but 3 student placements as a student in San Francisco State. She spent her first semester with Sunday Streets, which is the picture here with her instructor from English. She to get to know the community and play with some of the kids. And also Project Shine and SF State's Early Education Center. So there is a community aspect. There's also Project Shine, which actually is where she assisted English language learners like her to learn to communicate and increase their knowledge and command of the English language. So she did that. And then also she worked with very young, actually, Early Education Center at SF State. And you know what it is about Maria that is also very impressive? Maria did this as a first-year student at SF State. She's a first-year student who did all this for her community engagement projects in the beginning of her career at SF State. So a lot of our younger folks saying, oh, I'm just coming out of high school, or maybe just transferring from another institution. I'm not, well-versed of what's going on around here. Someone like Maria really put her kind of cards out there and just tried to see what she's identify what she's passionate about and connected with her instructor, and she was able to indicate locate some of the projects that she was able to get involved in. And then finally, I also do want to feature Jan, which is in the middle. He's in the middle. These are some of the faculty from Asian American Studies. Also, they're doing very much great work. But Jan actually works for a Filipino Bayanihan Equity Center in San Francisco. He is a graduate. So one of the ways that he got involved is because he interned. Okay, he was an intern, and it was for helping Filipino World War II veterans, because his father or his grandfather was in the same situation, served our nation as an immigrant, right? And then what happened here is that he started, as you can see kind of at the bottom of this paragraph, is that he started as a volunteer for the organization for the fall semester. And then because of his involvement, became a full-time community worker for the same organization in October of 2017. So got hired, right, in that organization to continue that work. So talking about career pipeline, right? Talking about building networks and really looking at your passion and how you continue doing that work with the same organization and ultimately get paid after you graduate. And then also doing that work won Jan the SF State's Excellence in Service Award. So doing this work too will help you do all these things, but also it can put your name out there for nominations for some of these great awards that will acknowledge you with your faculty and with your departments, right? So again, very folks who kind of made it work, I suppose. So then kind of moving on to our last bit here, which is the Institute for Civic and Community Engagement. Again, the department that I work in. I do want to introduce you to us and what we do and why we're so passionate about the speech I just made, right? About getting involved and some of the examples, like why are we passionate about this? And what is it that grounds us at the institution? At the left here, you'll see, again, pre-pandemic, folks who are doing some, it's actually a one-day activity that we did with first-year students, again, getting them involved early, but again, never too early to, never too late to get started. First-year students to beautify some of the streets in the Mission neighborhood in San Francisco with some of our nonprofit organization that works there. It's just one day that we did a project, but we also learned about what it means to really beautify the streets. You know, it's not just getting your hours in, but it's also it also actually addresses wastewater, right? It also addresses certain things that may go on in the neighborhood. Like it may defer people from there's other effects, I guess what I'm saying, with beautifying the neighborhoods and some of the streets beyond just doing this for 1 hour and obviously making it pretty and amazing, but there's also other benefits to this. So our mission is to really, we have this tagline, learning together, creating positive change. Our mission at the Institute is to connect faculty, staff, and students with the community. Okay, so how do we look internally with our staff, with our faculty, and our students, and be that bridge to the Bay Area community? And the way we do that is many different ways. We have many different tentacles and many different programs. One of them is just a service learning program. But we help develop these types of civic engagement and civic awareness that we would then again hope, and we know, actually we just don't hope, that they do turn into leading into positive impacts in our community. So we develop the opportunities, we help to kind of challenge some of the barriers that then go into producing some great social impacts in our community. So our goal is to really connect the classroom, campus, and the community. So there's this triangular relationship that we see at the Institute. And we know that in doing this in a collaborative way, really benefits each other. Just like I said earlier, that is this kind of relationship is mutual, right? It's not just one way, it's a triangular. How can we think of each other as community? The folks on the left here, again, are students that are out there making a difference, whether it be literacy, folks who are in business doing marketing for some of our community partners, anything. These opportunities are that we craft or help bring into the university really move beyond just one major, but it's all throughout the university, whether you are a blooming scientist or you are in a nursing program. It's we really look at that in terms of just common goals and challenges that we can address rather than just one specific one. We also have different anchor programs. If you do want to talking about the elections, we do have actually a nationally acclaimed internship where students actually go to Washington, D.C. It's called Panetta Congressional Internship. The political science department is probably very known on, or they know and what that is, but it's really a prestigious internship where one from SF State gets to be chosen. Only one per CSU gets to go to the Congress and really learn the ways of national government and how to make an impact in a broader scale. We have service learning, again, that kind of combines service with learning. And then also academic internships. If you are interested in academic internships, we are here to kind of assist you in that process. So kind of continuing to address the issue, or maybe the myth, quote unquote, earlier about things being virtual and being remote, right? It's like, well, right now we're remote learning. I mean, how do I get involved? Right. So one of the things that we have is actually a website. I mean, now that we have technology rolling, right, we actually have a database of all of the community partners that we have, reading partners of them earlier, Alamany Farms, I talked about other things, but we actually have more than 500 organizations that are registered on our website that are ready to go in working with anybody, either in the community already or students in the university. A lot of them are here in the Bay Area. As you can see, SF State is a city and county serving institution. So as you can see, a lot of the bullet points are right there. And again, issues are far ranging. They are in a spectrum, whether it be education, water quality, air quality, whatever it may be, policy, doing assessments. I mean, I can go on and on about different projects that have happened, but they are out there. And one concrete way that you can start is to go on our website, look at some of the opportunities that are on there. I'm very much open to speaking with you after the presentation, whatnot, going to spring semester and looking at some of the points here and some of the organizations that are ready to work with you. So going on to the spring semester, how do you contact me? Actually, well, we still have drop-in virtual hours for our staff members at ICCE. We are available every Tuesday and Friday for 1.5 hours. A lot of the times we are, using that time to actually catch up with each other in our work, because students don't necessarily visit us. We want you all to visit us, please do. Sometimes we are very lonely in there. We are still going until the next couple of weeks for the fall. If you want to get prepared in what you can do for the spring, We are very much open in the spring semester. If you can bookmark this link, because that will post what days we are going to be open for some of these conversations virtually during the Zoom hours for the spring, because we don't have that finalized yet. But we will very soon. If you bookmark the website, we will very much be open to speaking with you. My email is very simple, glendy@sfsu.edu, and also our website and our email. And I will leave it at that. Joel?
Okay. Thank you very much, Glendy, for that detailed and very informative presentation. One of the things I've learned from this experience of the Zoom webinar is your triangle of campus, community, and the importance of communication between the campus and the community through using engagement, community engagement, and learning. And I hope that along with ICCE and the faculty, that when you look at that map that you had of all of the community partners, it goes really far afield from Marin to South Bay, to San Mateo, to Alameda, and to the East Bay. And one of the things I've learned is the power of communication through Zoom. And I hope the university, which has always had a commitment to the community going all the way back to its origin in 1899, is that we can start making some of the exciting, wonderful educational developments on campus available to people who can't get to campus, and to bring the power of learning to people in the community who, for one reason or another, cannot be a full-time student or cannot get to campus at 10:30 in the morning on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And it seems to me that one of the lasting consequences of this pandemic and the use of Zoom is going to change education. And we're going to need to think more broadly than just our own immediate student body, but also thinking about community education. And I certainly hope that once the pandemic is over with, that we in education try to expand our product, because as Professor Hayduk's presentation and your own shows, that we are a better community if we are more informed. And with information comes power. And I think one of the key words on one of your slides was empowerment. And I think we need to do that in various ways for students, for the community, and with the faculty and the institution. One more point before I introduce a colleague of yours, Glendy, Jill Russell, who works in the office, and I just want her to take a few minutes to introduce herself and to describe her experience at the Institute. I do want to give another thank you, which I omitted earlier, and that is the idea for today's theme did not come from me. It actually came from a colleague who worked with me on doing a Zoom, sorry, not a Zoom webinar. In 2016, we did it in person. And that is my colleague in the political science department, Professor Marcela Garcia Gastañon. And when we were working on themes, it was Marcela's suggestion that we have the last theme focus on post-election, post-voting. And I wanted to give her credit for making that suggestion, which I hope will become a fixture for all versions, all future versions of this course on presidential elections. Jill, are you there? Do you want to turn on your video and just introduce yourself? Hi, and just say a word, a little bit about your experience at the Institute. If you can unmute. There you go.
Okay, my name is Jill and I'm the operations manager creating organizational efficiency at the ICCE Institute. My direct responsibilities are in operations and human resources and budget. However, because I believe in community service and advocacy for social and economic and educational inclusiveness, I feel fortunate that in the spring, I'll become more involved with working with community partners and promoting opportunities for students. And I think that when you become involved civically, it lets you have a say about important collective decisions, such as in public transit, criminal justice reform, social services, funding for public education, and climate change policy. When you advocate for social justice, you're vocalizing what you need and want and believe in, and you're standing up and demanding an improvement in society, and you can raise your chances of getting a government that actually represents you, your values, and your interests. Your civic engagement in society can have a domino effect in getting important initiatives started. We at ICCE seek to create sustainable opportunities for students to get involved and help create an institution of higher education that is fully engaged as the city's university. As Glendy mentioned, opportunities for civically engagement are available on ULink, where students can become more involved in much needed relationships with our communities. And we'll have our virtual office hours posted on our website. So I hope you visit us and we can talk further about opportunities.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Jill. And I wish you all the best in your spring work with community partners. And I know that they will appreciate having additional resources at the Institute that they can rely on. So good luck in the spring in that new venture for you.
Thank you.
And now our final guest at the terrific suggestion of Professor Hayduk. He said to me, why don't we have a terrific student who can talk about her own experience in community and civic engagement? And when Ron uttered those words, I immediately agreed. It was such a terrific suggestion. And he not only made the suggestion, but he recruited the next speaker to participate. And I've gotten to know Kayla a little bit in a practice session for the Zoom. And I am really impressed with Kayla Breeze and her activities. And I know you will also be impressed. So Kayla, why don't you take it away and give the audience some insight into the actual projects that you have been engaged in and what you have learned from them.
Thank you so much. I'm going to start sharing my screen. All right. Cool. There we go. All right. So thank you so much for inviting me into this space to represent the students here. So I'm going to just be talking a little bit about my journey to activism and community organizing work that I've done, and how I got there and what I've done to kind of just I know a lot of people can think that, you know, becoming engaged in the community and doing this type of work is a little intimidating, or they don't really know what to expect when starting to want to engage. So I just want to make this kind of work seem a little more real to y'all, you know, just show what I've done. So before I start, I just wanted to introduce myself a little bit. So my name is Kayla Breeze. I use she, her pronouns. I was born and raised in San Francisco Mission District on Ramaytush Ohlone land. I always like to give land acknowledgements to recognize that we are on stolen land. I am a San Francisco State University student, majoring in political science and double minoring in race and resistance studies as well as education. I'm a fourth year here at SF State. I'm also a Balboa High School ethnic studies teacher with Pinoy Educational Partnerships. I also work and was a student for the Metro College of Education and Ethnic Studies as an assistant coordinator. And I was also working for San Francisco Rising as a student organizer, and that's kind of what mainly I will be talking about today. This is a little picture of me and my parents when I graduated high school. Um, and so I want to start just by introducing kind of my first year and second year here at SF State. So I wasn't really involved, honestly. You know, looking at all the things I'm doing now, you might think, whoa, like you're really involved. How do you do that? But I actually started off coming to SF State not really knowing what I wanted to do. I was super undeclared. I had no career path kind of in mind that I wanted. And I was just working retail. I was working at a boutique, long hours, late nights, going to school and then coming back home, and that's pretty much it. But one thing I did know was that I knew that I cared about issues impacting my community and my family. So I knew that I cared about immigration and undocumented folks because both of my parents are children of immigrants. Both of sets of my grandparents are immigrants. My mom's side being from El Salvador and my dad's side being from the Philippines. I understood what kind of, you know, the struggles of being an immigrant in the U.S. is. My partner is undocumented, so I know what that feels like, and that just kind of having to be in that situation too. I knew that housing and access to basic needs was something that I was really passionate about because my parents had me at a really young age, and I saw them struggle through that. Access to equitable and liberating education is important to me because my mom was the first in her family to graduate from college, and I'm the first in my dad's side of the family to graduate from college. I know that ethnic studies is important to me because it's what honestly opened me up to all of this work, and it's really important to me because of that. I know that San Francisco and California politics is really important to me because I grew up in this city, and this is the city that made me, and I have a lot of love for my city. So I knew these things are things that I wanted to go into or focus on, but I didn't really know how. So what the first thing I did was just start applying for fellowships, applying for internships, and volunteering. And I just was applying to anything having to do with any of those things because I really didn't know exactly what I wanted. And finally, after a lot of rejections, after a lot of no callbacks, I did get an email back from San Francisco Rising. So I started working with San Francisco Rising as a fellow in 2019. San Francisco Rising is a coalition of a bunch of different organizations in San Francisco. From all of these organizations pictured here: Causa Justa, Mujeres Unidas y Activas, Chinese Progressive Association, Coleman Advocates for Children and Youth, and many more. A lot of these organizations focusing on immigrant rights, sanctuary city, worker organizing and wage theft, affordable housing, tenant rights and counseling, youth organizing for restorative justice, environmental justice, and mental health, and a lot more. So it was kind of the opening of my kind of just introduction to like this new organizing and these new you know, grassroots organizations that I never really heard about, that I seen around the city growing up, but I never really participated in. And so what the summer 2019 San Francisco Rising Fellowship consisted of was all these things to the left. So when I first applied, I had no experience in doing any type of organizing work any type of community work besides some like volunteering for like, you know, as a tutor or volunteering at my local like pet shelter. That's like the only things I did. And now I had to be introduced to all these new things. And it was super intimidating at first. But honestly, with the group of people and with these organizations, they really make sure that you are prepared and that you have a community of people that are like walking you through these things, so that you can learn and you can be involved. So now I'm going to kind of just go into all the different things that I did over this fellowship and after the fellowship, in different kind of sections, so y'all can get an idea of what this means. What does community organizing and what does engagement mean? With this being said, it's not necessarily like all the ways that you can do it, but here's a few that we did in the summer. So we worked on 2 grassroots campaigns, one of them being College for All, fighting for free college for all Californians, and fighting for the whole college education system in California to be free, which is still something that's going on. It's still a movement. And Schools and Communities First, or if some of y'all have saw in the last election season, it was Prop 15. So unfortunately, it did not get passed, but this was another one of the campaigns that we did work on. So a big part of it was political education and learning the fundamentals of organizing. So a lot of this was having time with community leaders who have been veterans in doing this kind of work. So they were doing this work for years. They've been on the front lines, you know, just writing these campaigns out, planning these campaigns, organizing everything. And it was time for us to kind of be in that space with them and really ask them how they did that. And really get the knowledge from the people themselves that are working in the communities, talking to community members 24/7 to see what they need and what they need to work on. So that was a big part of it. And this educational part was really important because I feel like even though I did grow up in San Francisco, there's so much that I didn't know was happening. And so this was a way for me to kind of understand better what these organizations were doing and how we could help. Another big thing was meeting politicians. So this is a picture of us with District 6 Supervisor Matt Haney, where we got to discuss our campaign that we were working on, College for All, and talk to him about strategizing and how do we get this out to the community? How do we get this out to politicians? And how can politicians help us back it? And what are some things that he thinks that our opponents are going to do for us or do to us, or what are the kind of language that they're going to use against us? So it was really cool being able to collaborate and just ask questions and kind of understand the politician aspect of it and what it means to be a politician on these campaigns. A really, really big part of organizing is base building and building your base and building your supporters. So we did a lot of canvassing and door knocking, meaning we went to, specifically when we were working on College for All, we went to different campuses. So we went to San Francisco State, we went to City College, we went to University of San Francisco, USF, and we talked to students about what they were going through, you know, about affordability and access to college and higher education and what they wanted. We had scripts to go off of just in case, because a lot of us were first-time canvassers. A lot of them did have experience. I was a first-time canvasser, so I didn't know, you know, the kind of ropes of how to do it. So we did have our clipboards with our little notes if we needed to. We didn't really and we also went with partners. So we went up to students with partners at the beginning because, you know, it was intimidating. But then after we got the hang of it, we were going by ourselves, talking to students, asking them real questions about what do you think about having free college? Is that something you want? And that's how we kind of built our base and built our supporters. Similar to that, we did a lot of phone banking. So connecting with voters, connecting with people who are going to vote on these, you know, different ballot measures about what they think, to kind of understand, you know, like if we were to use this kind of language, would you vote for it? Or would you vote for this in saying this, you know? So we did this a lot in Excelsior Works, the space in the Excelsior district that helps, you know, low-income communities and immigrant workers, and we got to use their space. We would all have our laptops out with snacks, and we would all be calling people in one room together. And it was my first time phone banking, so it was really intimidating. But to be able to be in a space with community that whole time, it was really helpful, and it was really, encouraging when talking to the next voter and talking to the next voter and being able to really like show them, this is what's happening in your community, and you need to be informed about that so that you know what you need to vote for, and what you need to vote on to better your community. And along with that, we planned community events. So as college students, we thought the best form of getting, supporters and getting people out was by having an open mic. A lot of young people are struggling through college, are also like artists and want to, voice out how they feel. So we hosted an open mic night that we organized our whole selves at the Women's Building, and a bunch of students came through. They did their spoken word, they did their music, they displayed their art, about, just being a college student, and the struggles of being a student of color, the struggles of being a low income student, a working student, an undocumented student, and really just being in community and solidarity with one another. Another thing we did was Liberation and Lemonade. We had a little cookout at Dolores Park, just to, hang out. A lot of community organizers, the work that we do is work that's really dear to our hearts. So we put in all the effort and all, the love that we can into this work. And a lot of times it can be stressful, and it can be, people can experience burnout. So we decided to have this community event to get the community together to relax for one moment. So that's another thing we did. Another thing we did, we didn't actually plan any direct actions, but we did support a lot of other organizations who did have direct action. So for example, during our time in the fellowship, it was Prime Day for Amazon, and it was around the time where Amazon was trying to sell ICE facial recognition systems. And so we went out with San Francisco Rising, Bay Resistance, Mi Gente, to fight this and to protest against Amazon. This is another picture on the bottom at the People Sona against Duterte in the Philippines, and what he's doing out there, and what the U.S. and how the U.S. is contributing to all the terror that is happening in the Philippines. So we were able to go to the Philippine consulate and help in the direct actions that were happening there. Another thing that's kind of new to organizing now is just social media strategizing. So now that social media is being so used, it's a great tool for getting supporters and getting the word out. So we're able to make videos, to make kind of just posts spreading the word. This one on the bottom is just a campaign we did with like college should be free because, and then people were able to fill in the blank, or if college were free, I blank, and then people were able to like take pictures with that at one of our events. So that's another way that people are getting involved. And sadly, summer 2019 ended, which meant the fellowship did end, but that didn't mean the organizing stopped. It exposed me to a whole new world and new connections. So all these organizations that are, partnered with San Francisco Rising, along with a lot of organizations that we were able to talk with and speak with during the fellowship. And that kind of just opens the door. The organizing community is very small. So someone you meet in one space might be organizing in 3 other spaces too. So it's a great way to network with your people, to get involved in other organizations and other causes that are dear to your heart. So the organizing never stopped, and we continue to organize at San Francisco State. We continue to organize for schools and communities first. So there was definitely a lot still happening. And when you start organizing with these people, they make sure that you're able to continue to do that and help in any way possible. So even though the fellowship ended, that didn't mean that I stopped helping out. And even through a pandemic. So Generation Rising Fellowship 2020 still happened. It was through Zoom, and it was over 40 young folks of color that came together to defeat Trump. So basically, the fellowship was supposed to go on in person, but because of the pandemic and everything, we still had to put it on. And we did it through Zoom, and I was asked to be a fellowship organizer for this Generation Rising Fellowship in 2020 after continuing to work with San Francisco Rising. So as a fellowship organizer, I helped plan political education trainings. I helped facilitate the phone bank sessions that we were doing. So I was training everyone on how you phone bank. I was looking at the data and analytics of the phone banks, like what happened after, how many people we contacted, how many people were able to, say yes to whatever we were calling them about, and really look at, what we needed to improve on and what folks needed after that. And also looking at the care and connection of the fellows. So we formed big, like really true bonds with all the fellows, even though we were on Zoom, and that was a big goal of ours too. So Generation Rising Fellowship consisted of working on the presidential election and other just like local elections happening in swing states. So what was great about, the one thing that was great about having this fellowship on Zoom was that we were able to connect with other organizations outside of our state. So we worked in Arizona with Lucha, we worked in Pennsylvania with PA Stands Up, and we worked in Florida with New Florida Majority. These are grassroots organizations that were doing work way before this election, in their own communities, in making sure, their communities were being represented. And now, these states were really important for this election and the president election. So they teamed up with Generation Rising, Seed the Vote, and, San Francisco Rising to work together in all of our bases and get all of us from our organizations to phone bank in each state. So, talk about people power, right? So all of us were able to call into Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Florida to talk to voters, to get voters registered, to talk to them about local elections that were happening, and to inform them about all those things. And then later on in Georgia, we partnered with New Georgia Project Action Fund, and all these other organizations that are listed about, the runoff elections. And so a lot of folks were still continuing to call into Georgia even after the presidential election. I unfortunately didn't continue working with San Francisco Rising after the fellowship, just after summer, just because of other work and wanting to focus on school. But this is still more things that they're doing after this fellowship. So it's really great to see that, despite the, pandemic, there's still work being done on Zoom. And there's still work being done in person too. There are a lot of direct actions happening, as we saw in the summer with Black Lives Matter. I participated in a car caravan against anti-terror laws in the Philippines. And one of SF Rising's partner organization, Coleman Advocates for Children and Youth, worked really hard with SFUSD to cut ties with SFPD, which happened. So it's really important that we continue to organize despite these, circumstances that we're in, because, issues are happening all the time. Just because an election passed doesn't mean there's nothing happening anymore. In doing this work, there will be some big wins and a lot of losses, as I talked about. SFUSD, that was a big win. Prop 15 didn't pass, that was a big loss. And all of this organizing work does have huge impacts on the movement and the community. So that's kind of like, the big reason why you might join these organizations and participate in this, because you want to make an impact in your community. That's why I joined. But another thing that Professor Hayda talked about, and everyone else, is that, this work does help the community, but it also does so much for you. It improved my public speaking skills. It, improves your team building skills, work experience. I did get paid for all of the things that I did with San Francisco Rising. They did make sure that they were taking care of their fellows and the people that worked for them. And whether it be through, making sure that they had our lunches ready, while still stipending us money after the fellowship, or, paying us for the hours that we were phone banking, they try their best, because they know that, especially in San Francisco, cost of living is high. And it's not like a lot of people can do work without getting paid. So there's a lot of organizations out there that are willing to pay their people, and make sure that they're taken care of. So that's a really big factor in it too. So with a, you know, like I said before, elections happen every few years, but there's organizing happening 24/7 on important issues everywhere. So what I urge all of y'all is to just find an organization that aligns with your values and get involved. Email their people, you know, volunteer, do anything that you can, because ultimately it's going to open a new open doors for you in this kind of new realm that you may not have really known was there for you. So that's definitely what I urge all for you. And I just want to say thank you again for inviting me to the space and having a student voice here. And I hope we can continue to have student voices in all of these talks.
That's great. Thank you very much, Kayla. The presentation was terrific, and your work and going from your first year experience to the culmination of activities in so many different ways really shows the growth that you talked about and that Professor Hayduk talked about also. We have a couple of questions, which since we have a few moments, one question that occurred to me based on the questions that were raised is, I know, Kayla, you're mentioning that you're a political science major and race and resistance, but let's say I'm a chemistry major and I don't know much about social issues. One of the questions that was raised is, what is the Institute for Civic and Community Engagement doing about prison reform, about homelessness, about poverty? But let's say I've been a science nerd in high school, and then I come to college and I don't really know much about homelessness, and I don't really know a lot about prisons in California. What does that lack of knowledge mean for my getting involved in the community? Glendy talked about barriers. We have a lot of students that don't major in courses or do reading that reflects the social issues that the organizations that you work for address. If you could say a few words, any of you, if you have ideas about a person who's not experienced and not knowledgeable about social issues.
I don't know if Kayla has any thoughts. I mean, I can start. I think, well, a couple of things. So kind of going, the point about, for example, being a chemist or a future chemist, right? Or like an astrophysicist, but I still want to get involved in the community. I think it's really looking at the perspective, or thinking about the fact that, you know, what comes in my mind is that I actually had a student approach me when I was at orientation, because he said he's a chemistry major and he's really passionate about water quality, right? He was, you know, he's a chemistry major, he's a science nerd or whatnot. You know, but that's what he was passionate about. But he was also looking for an internship, but he's also passionate about community engagement. So how does he merge those two? Or maybe someone coming from the business sector, right? But then but that person actually, you know, does want to make community impact. So I think it's really one strategy I can offer, and other folks can say other things, is that, for example, when you look at our website, or when you look at the Institute, or when you look at a nonprofit organization, it's not about, well, how do I say this? It's looking beyond their mission and what they do, but what you can contribute, if that makes sense. Because, for example, that student who is a chemistry major, I ended up linking him to the Golden Gate National Parks. Now you're like, oh, the Parks Conservancy, that's thing, right? But it's really the fact that the National Parks Conservancy is actually an interdisciplinary and a broad organization. So how can I, right, that has the specific skill or this specific knowledge about a major, go into an organization regardless of the name? Because if you look at the name, National Parks Conservancy may just be like, well, those are for RPT folks, you know, those are for tourism folks, right? Those are for park folks. Actually, I think one strategy is looking beyond that and looking at some of the opportunities, some of the programs, some of the committees, some of the initiatives that they may have, and how you can plug in. So that student who is actually a chemistry major, he ended up working with some of like the water assessments in the park, and how and putting in his expertise with regards to that area that he was studying. So again, there may be some mismatch at first as you look at some of these organizations' names or whatnot, but it shouldn't disengage, or at least don't disengage just because you feel like you can't fit within. It's really try to look deeper, I guess my goal is. And really take that step regardless of what the name of the organization and the opportunity is.
Okay, thank you. That was terrific. Does anybody else want to address someone who's a major but doesn't know much about social problems?
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. So one of the fellows that was in the fellowship in summer 2019 with me is actually a computer science major from Stanford. So, you know, just because you are doing a major in another field, all you really have to have is just a real care and passion for the community and for what this organization is doing and what the values of this organization is. And from there on, that's all they can ask for, you know? And a lot of these organizations do a really good job of answering your questions, of training you and making sure that you're ready and you feel ready to go out in the field and do the work that you're doing. So I don't think it has to do anything with, you know, like, oh, I'm this major and I don't really know about social justice, but I'm going to apply to this social justice thing because I care about it. You know, that's acceptable. Like,
Would you say, Kayla, that such a hypothetical student could get a good education from the experience and the organization if they're devoted to educating the people who they work with from the ground up, from the elementary level to more advanced levels? And in effect, this kind of community engagement work can also be a learning experience for the student, so that even though the student didn't take courses, they're learning a lot about the social issues.
Yeah, of course. I think it's definitely a great opportunity for someone to learn a lot and learn the skills, you know, even though, you know, the skills that we talked about that you get or that I talked about and Hayda talked about is that, you know, skills of public speaking, like team building, those are things that go for anywhere. They go for any field. So I think it's definitely, you can gain a lot even if it's something that's not necessarily in your field. Mhm.
Okay. Ron, do you have a comment on this hypothetical student?
I would just echo what Glendy and Kayla said very powerfully and beautifully. You can learn a lot about yourself aside from the actual topics and contexts that you're going to immerse yourself in wherever you try. And, you know, a chemist, an accountant, they're whole people, right? So that particular area, as Glendy said very well, you know, those can apply to different settings. That interest in chemistry, clean air, clean water. Well, oh my goodness, there's so many different organizations or levels that you could be involved in. I have a friend who is the director of communications for the National Park Service. The guy's actually like an artist, but he got this gig and he uses his storytelling capacities in his work. He started off as an intern and actually flourished there and got a job. You know, there's just countless stories of people like this where if you get out into the world, you're going to find out a lot about what's out there in the world, but you'll also find out a lot about yourself and what you can do and what you like. And I guess one other thing to say is some of the concepts that faculty are trying to teach students In political science, of course, theories of power, or how do elections function. One of my first experiences was actually getting a position where I got to look at how urban politics worked in New York, and how electoral laws were formed and fought over, and how practices had impacts. I spent 2.5 years in the New York Public Library reading about how elections work. I learned a lot. It's awesome. I love that experience. But I learned things that I would never have learned. There's new data that I was exposed to, and the way community groups interface. Just so many different dimensions that you can learn about yourself and the whatever sector you put yourself out in. And as Kayla said, I'll just shut up after this, that if you just get out there and try different things, you'll learn both about what's out there as well as what's in yourself.
Jill, do you have a comment about a hypothetical student who doesn't know much about social issues?
I would just say, to emphasize what everybody else says, is that the invaluable skills, networking skills and public speaking skills that a student would gain is just would go with them, for a lifetime. And they'd be able to engage in conversations, and be well-rounded. And a lot of the times, it's what the community needs as well. So we can't always predict personally what the community needs. So it's best to give it a try and to become engaged and involved, because the community, we're doing things for the community and what their needs are as well.
Okay, I have one wrap question that not only will be the final question for this session, but will be the final question for the whole semester. And I'm going to try to combine the previous 14 weeks of sessions with this one. All of you work in the community, all of you care greatly about the community. Make believe you have 5 seconds or 10 seconds, 30 seconds with President-elect Biden. What is the one issue you would emphasize in that meeting? Go ahead, Kayla. Oh, I thought you were raising your hand. I didn't mean to put pressure on you.
I was just complaining that it's only one that I can bring up.
Yes, you don't have 5 hours with the president. You have to choose what would be your most important issue for the next president to address.
I'll jump on it.
Go ahead.
I as a daughter, and as a daughter of immigrants, and as a grandchild of the giants of whom shoulders I stand on, I will ask him to reunite the children of our immigrants at the borders with their families. And that I say with my heart aching every day. So I leave it at that.
Okay, thank you for that. Kayla, Ron, Jill?
Such a hard
I
question.
I can just be brief, just that I would just say to focus on equal representation and, stand behind underrepresented people and people of color to get their voices heard and get social justice and equal opportunities.
Okay, very important. Professor Hayduk.
I guess I
can't
would
imagine you being speechless.
Yeah, no, I'm not speechless. I mean, I was like Kayla, just one. I have a whole list, but I guess in the spirit of this session and deepening democracy, I would really implore President Biden to devote tremendous resources and his capacity to create offices of civic and community engagement in every town, in every state, where you could really bring people, regular folks in every neighborhood, in every community, into the business of governing and transform governance so that it's really more meaningful and responsive and effective. Because we're in a place in the United States where, it's a little rough out here in the world. And I think, President Biden says he wants to help the nation heal. Well, I think this would be a good down payment in helping people connect around common ground and forge common ground. And yeah, you struggle, you work out differences, but that's kind of like how, the messy business of democracy and community engagement. And I think that would just be one thing. I would just, one.
And you know what? You wouldn't be the first person who suggested something that a president replied, okay, you're going to be in charge of the new office of civic and community engagement. How about that? All right, Kayla, you get the last word.
I'm still like going back and forth in my head, so it's really hard. But I think, I guess, right now it would be a focus on healthcare for all, free healthcare for all, just because of the pandemic happening right now, and a lot of, just in my experience, like seeing folks who do not have access to healthcare are like so scared, and they are also the people who are frontline workers who have to be out there, exposed every day. So I think that would be what I would implore, and really want him to hold himself accountable for, and tell him to listen to all the grassroots organizations that are telling him to do things, because they're important.
Okay, I not only have learned a lot about community engagement, but I've learned about 4 really important issues. I'm not sure I had an answer for that, but I was impressed with your answers. So thank you for teaching me and the viewers about civic and community engagement in a fantastic session. Thank you for your great slideshows, which really showed really well on the screen. Thank you for your time and energy. And to Jill and Glendy and to Kayla, thank you so much for your work in helping others contribute to the community. And to my colleague, Ron, thank you for teaching passionately and effectively in ways that I could never do. And so I admire your effort. And thank you all the viewers for hanging in with this session. Be safe during this lockdown. And we hope to see you maybe in another webinar in some other version of a course. Thank you all for participating in this 2020 presidential election Zoom webinar. Good night. Thanks.